Oh, it's already starting.
Okay, good. It's turn ringers off too.
That's a good idea. Hey, you guys, we're about to go live here in a moment. We are taking a look at these amazing Dallas candidates running for office to save
You want to
America.
go airplane mode or not?
No pressure. Right now we have 10, 11, 14. I'm not for sure which one of the streams is showing me which numbers, but it's going on. Thank you guys so much for coming. I know we're a little behind, like I told y'all earlier. We'll get started soon. Can you guys message me and tell me if you guys can hear me okay? Hello, I can see your message on YouTube. You know what? Let's go ahead and do introductions. We have people waiting. So, can you guys please introduce yourself and please say why you're running for office and which seat you're running for? And Sam, can you go first?
Sure. So my name is Samuel Smith. I'm running for State House District 107. That's Mesquite mostly, and also parts of South Garland and East Dallas, all the way over from the Lakewood area, which is west of White Rock Lake, and then it just stretches to the east of there up to 635. I'm originally from East Dallas. My father was a professor at SMU, and I grew up in East Dallas area. And then my family moved to Cairo, Egypt, and I spent my middle and high school years over there. My father transferred to be a professor at the American University in Cairo. He also worked in Christian ministry over there. He worked as an Egyptian pastor, and they were working with Egyptian Christians and helping to disciple them and teach them how to share their faith with their Muslim counterparts there in Egypt and across the Middle East. I was over there when 9/11 happened, and actually several hijackers were from Egypt. So that was an interesting experience, as well as when we invaded Afghanistan and Iraq shortly after that. And that all combined with the fact that I have military in my family on both sides motivated me to want to join the military. And so I was blessed with the opportunity to attend the United States Military Academy at West Point. I double majored in civil engineering and applied mathematics, and served as an Army officer for about 5 years. I was supposed to go to Afghanistan, but both times it got canceled. First was because Obama got elected and was doing a drawdown, and then the second reason was Ebola broke out in Liberia, and the U.S. was sending a response over there, and they needed civil engineers to help construct field hospitals out in the jungle for quarantining and treating the sick. And they didn't have many, so they sent me over there and got to manage a team of about 50 Liberians and building those buildings out there to pave the way for the sick people to be treated. So that was quite the interesting experience for me. After I returned from that deployment, I married my now wife Lydia, and we were there at our station at Fort Hood, which is in Central Texas, about 3 hours south of here, and finished out my time in the military, and then moved back here to DFW. We now live in Mesquite, and we have 4 children. I have a son, twin daughters, and then another son. And we're loving life here. We both have it. Our families are in the area. My father is now back in the U.S., retired from being a professor, and is a pastor out in Rockwall, Texas. And my father-in-law is actually the music leader and the assistant pastor at that church, and that's where I actually met my wife. And I'm running for office because, well, for many reasons, but the biggest reason is because the current incumbent is a radical leftist. Just for example, this past week we had a debate, and one of the questions was, are you willing to condemn the violence being perpetrated by elements of Black Lives Matter and Antifa in our cities? And she refused to answer the question. And that's just, to me, that's a very fundamental purpose of government, is to protect our rights to life, liberty, and property. And so we can't condemn blatant, gross violations of that in our cities. That should not be a partisan issue. It should be just straightforward. Whether you agree with the ideology of the groups or not, using violence to advance it, I don't care if it's a right-wing group or a left-wing group or whatever, religious group, it's unacceptable. And so that's just appalling. She's extremely radically pro-abortion, voted for dismemberment abortions all the way up till birth, government funded, tens of thousands of dollars from Planned Parenthood. I could go on, but bottom line is it's unacceptable that someone like that is in office, and there was no one else running against her. And so I had already had some people. I went to a training last summer, actually. I was not thinking at all about running for office, but I went to a training for veterans in Austin who were interested in the political process and being involved in some way, which I was. And I had several former state reps at that event encouraged me to look into running. And so that's what led me to think about it. And then given who the incumbent was and no one else was running, actually a mutual friend of ours, Bunny Pounds, I talked to her as well, and she thought that'd be a good fit. So all that worked together to me decide to run. And here we are a year later, getting ready to start voting next week. And we're the underdog, but we think we've got a fighting chance. We're working really hard, and we're trusting the Lord to work things out for us. Win or lose, we're giving it a good shot. We're making her work harder than she would have had to if she didn't have an opponent, and trying to hold her feet to the fire. So.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am Jessica Lewis, and I'm running for the 14th Judicial District Court of Texas. That is a civil district court. That means that it's a court that doesn't handle criminal matters. It also doesn't handle family matters. Those are specialized courts. But it handles a variety of things, whether it be your typical business disputes, pirate cases, and it can even touch on constitutional issues. So I am a local attorney. I have practiced here in the Dallas area. I actually went to law school here in the Dallas area, and kind of switch a little bit to the whole why I'm running aspect. It aligns a little bit of what Sam said. I know back in 2019, the middle of 2019, I would not have said that this is what I was going to be doing in 2020. I did, however, feel the conviction that we need to do more in this fight here in Dallas County. In 2018, for those that voted in Dallas County, if you went all the way down the ballot, you would have seen that there were over a dozen races where there was no Republican. And so it means that ultimately there's no choice. My opponent in a recent debate actually mentioned the idea of both the importance of the people choosing their judges in elections. But then he also had a problem with the Texas Supreme Court being predominantly Republican, and mentioned that my issue about the fact that Dallas County is kind of a one-party county at the moment as being inconsistent. Well, I would look at the Texas Supreme Court and say there are always two on the ballot for that, right? People are running in those races. In Dallas County, we have not been in that, and there's not been a choice for people. And while that maybe not be as big of a concern if there were absolutely no issues in Dallas County, I think there are. And I think that that's natural when you have a situation where there's no check on power, no matter who holds that power. I think that that's a dangerous thing. And so when you have one political party choosing who is going to be administrating justice in that county, that is a concerning situation. And so I set out with my husband, who we'll learn more about in a moment, to encourage people, in particular people of faith, to step up into these roles. And when I say people of faith, I'm not saying that I think that we need to institute a theocracy here. That is not the goal, and that is not what our Constitution is founded on. But I do believe, being a person of faith myself, that the foundation there, that of looking outside of yourself for that accountability, the understanding that the people were all created equal, and that we should not be looking at someone, oh, well, you're more powerful you have more money. I like your political opinions more, and giving that any weight in the courtroom. And I think that my faith provides a good foundation for that, ultimately the justice that we want to see in our courtroom. So I was setting out to get people to step into this space, and ultimately felt led to do it myself. And so my tagline is help restore faith in our courts here in Dallas County. And so there's that two aspects of it: the idea of caring about the worldview of our judges, want to make sure that people step into that role that have a solid foundation of the worldview, and they won't be easily swayed by influences that are outside of them, by personal gain, but they will bring humility and that foundation to the bench. And then also the idea of making sure that the people have a chance for just, impartial, and constitutionally focused judgments coming out of their courts. And ultimately, I tie this together with the idea that we are also supposed to care about our community as judges, look outside even the courtroom and try to make sure that courts are accessible as places where our disputes can be handled. I know some of that's a little bit maybe less exciting for people that are, it's like judges courtroom, unless it's, Law and Order, whatever the newest judicial TV show is. But if you have to show up in a courtroom, and hopefully you don't, but if you have to show up there because you're brought in, maybe not against, you're choosing, you want the chance for justice there. And so that's why it matters who's in these roles.
Thank you. My name is Jordan Montgomery Lewis. I am running for Civil District Judge in Dallas County, the 162nd Judicial District Court of Texas. My opponent, who currently is on the bench, is Judge Marisol Moore. When I went to the ballots in 2018, I was concerned to see that for approximately a dozen judicial races, that the reason that I was concerned is that as a lawyer, having practiced in Dallas County, I had heard of various people, individuals that I knew, and lawyers, saying that they had had disappointing experiences in the court. And I knew that it's very difficult to be in a courtroom to begin with. There's all of these rules, it's a foreign environment, and there is a certainty that some harm could come to you, through legal means. And a lot of times when people go to court, they're there with a lawyer that they've paid a lot of money for. They may have saved their life savings. They may have had money that they had set aside for something that was going to be meaningful for them, whether it was their child's wedding or their first business or their retirement. No one has extra money to be brought into court and dragged through the mud and risk everything in their life because of it. And so they only hire a lawyer because they need a lawyer, because it's a last resort, if you will. It's an acknowledgement that this is something that I'm afraid I can't do myself. I went into law because I felt that people needed an advocate, that they needed someone who would see them rightly and that would do everything that they could to advocate for them, and would acknowledge that they're a human being and that it costs them something, that every hour that I spent working on their behalf cost them a lot of money. It was meaningful, and I needed to put my best into it, that I needed to wrestle well with their problems and seek justice for them and counsel them if they weren't trying to seek justice. To remonstrate is the term that we use in law school, to try to teach them, hey, what you're asking for isn't right, actually, and I want to save you time and money, and I want to work with you to try to do the right thing in this opportunity. And so in 2018, when I saw this situation, I saw that there was no lawyer that I knew who was willing to run in these races. There was no lawyer from the conservative side or from the Christian side, or as far as I knew, at least, who was willing to challenge these courts. I was disappointed, and so I set about a mission to try to find people to step up, great judicial candidates to step up. And eventually I learned that the people who are qualified, people whom I would prefer to be in these positions, were unwilling to pursue it for a lot of different reasons. And one of them was fear. One was the fear of reprisal, that their clients or their practices would suffer if they took a stance against these entrenched judges. And I'm not here to bash my opponent in this race, but I'm trying to tell you the environment in which I decided to run. And so as I set upon that mission, it became impressed upon me as the time drew to an end to make the choice that I couldn't allow a seat to go uncontested. I was qualified. I lived in this county. My family was here. My community was here. My neighbors, my friends. And I needed to at least do everything that I could, as long as it depended on me, to step up and to make that stand myself. That's why my campaign has been about making a stand for Dallas County. If you live in Dallas County, you'll have a chance to see all of the civil district judge races on your ballot. So you'll see me on your ballot if you live in Dallas County, no matter what city you're in. It doesn't matter if you're in parts of Carrollton or Sunnyvale or Irving or whatever it is. That's 2.5+ million people. And this is a bottom, race. This isn't the presidency or even the state house or any of that. This is something that a lot of people don't think about, but it's a limited community of people. There's only maybe 20,000 lawyers who actually live in Dallas County who are qualified to run. And so if I didn't run, no one was going to run. I made sure of that, because I might not have run half. But I have served in a court. I clerked for a federal judge before beginning my private practice. And I got to see I got to work with a judge whom I highly admire, who always looked at each human being as who they were before God, and then looked at their laws looked at their rights under the Constitution, did everything under his power, did not be swayed by movements, money, influence, anything that might weigh upon the balances of justice. And where the law allowed him, where it gave him the opportunity to exercise discretion, he exercised it well. And his faith guided him in those matters of discretion. And so my model would be to do the same, to serve for my friends, neighbors, and for my community. And that's why I'm running this year. And I hope that you would come check out my website, Lewis4Dallas.com. Find me on Twitter, JMLewis4Dallas, and find out about me, support my campaign. But vote for me and vote for people who are going to protect your rights and who are going to fight for you this year. Thank you.
Since we are streaming on social media, first question for Sam, maybe for all of you guys. But what is your stance on social media censorship, and do you know anyone who has been censored?
Well, first of all, we do have a free market system, and so as long as it's not the government doing the censoring, I don't think it necessarily should be outlawed. That said, I currently work in the investment research universe, and so there's a growing movement called, and I don't know if everyone here is a Christian or everyone online, but there's a movement called Biblically Responsible Investing, and they provide a free filtering software where you can type in any stock, for example, or mutual fund, and it'll tell you the company or the companies involved in the mutual fund and what kind of stuff that they promote, either through their contributions, like for their marketing and stuff, or what they produce, or what kind of policies they have as a company, and that kind of lets you know what they do. And so personally, I would never invest in a company like Facebook for many reasons, but one of them being their censorship practices. Obviously, I guess I kind of support them because as a candidate, I have paid money to Facebook to run ads, but that's partly just the world we live in, right? So it's that tough balance. But back to the original question, I am very much against censorship on Facebook. I think it's terrible, or Twitter, or any of these other places. But I don't think, at least at this point, that the government should be involved in regulating it. I think the answer is free market competition. We need to have entrepreneurs. I know it's extremely hard because the competitive advantage and the network advantage that especially Facebook and even Twitter have is humongous. But at the end of the day, the conservative community is roughly half of our country. And even beyond that, the Christian community is even larger in terms of percentage of the population. So it's really just a matter of education. And, if enough of us, if there were some good alternatives and enough of us embraced it, while maybe, phasing out of Facebook and Twitter, we could at very least create a credible competitor. And the competition, I think, would change their behavior.
All right, yeah, so first off, I guess probably falls on me to give the background on judicial candidates and what we can and can't answer. So there are going to be parts of the questions that we're probably going to get tonight that, as a judicial candidate, I can't give the same kind of answer that Sam can. The reason being is because there are, and George speaks more to this as well, but there are certain restrictions on us as a judicial conduct requirements that we not give a strong impression that we're going to rule one way or the other if something comes into our courts, and something like this potentially could, right? So somebody, suing Facebook, I mean, I don't know about them, if there's jurisdiction and how the situation would be in any particular case, but that could come before the court. So just want to say that is in being mindful of all of these questions as to what is appropriate to answer. But I can speak to the idea that the First Amendment clearly is very near and dear for many reasons, including the idea of freedom of speech. And so it is concerning, and I just think as a consumer, I'm concerned when somebody claims to do one thing and then does something different. Someone claims to be an unbiased platform, but then they're acting a different way. Then, as Sam said, maybe creating market alternatives is the answer to that, but it concerns me. I also, though, will switch over ever so slightly to encourage maybe some self-censorship, because going on social media, which you need to do in this circumstance and in a campaign, man, you see the worst of our country. You can see some of the best, but you can also see some of the worst. So I do encourage people to be thoughtful about what they say, not in a meaning like the government should tell you you can't say this. It used to be the ACLU, right, resent opinions like that were awful. I think they've changed that now, but they would represent that because they cared about your right to say it. And I believe the same thing, and the right to say things. So it doesn't mean we have to utilize that right in ways that are ultimately harmful to the causes we care about. Let's be thoughtful about what we share and try to be compelling and not hateful. Because man, you spend a little bit of time on Twitter and social media, you can find that that it can weigh on your soul, and you can think that America's in a worse space than it really is. So let's try to balance that out. Is what I would go to.
I do think that we have, and she's referring to the canons 3 and 5 of the rules for judicial conduct, and they basically suggest that for candidates as well as judges, they may not make any statements that will give rise to the belief that you know how they would rule on a specific matter. Judges can only promise to faithfully administer and apply the law, which is what I certainly promise you that I would do. But with respect to this issue, I think what Sam and Jessica are both getting to, Samuel and Jessica are both getting to, is that it's kind of disappointing that one side, one set of voices have, I don't want to say monopoly in the legal sense, but they have a monopoly in the broader sense on giving voice to many people on social media. And there doesn't appear to be, hey, you can go to this store, but this store aligns with all of these views, but this store is a space that is welcoming for everybody. It seems like there is a universal monolith in terms of worldview that is somehow provided people the mainstream access to social media and is using it for their political purposes, perhaps. And I'm not trying to say that they are, but I'm saying that is the feeling that I believe a lot of Americans have. And I grew up at a time where it seemed like the conservatives were the Republicans were the ones who were leading in business in every sort of facet. And I still think that that's the case. And it's surprising to me to see that this is a space that has not seen a successful alternative voice for people to gravitate towards. Because, I believe that economics or valid capitalism works, and so we would see a lot of success in that space for the right voice.
Sam, if you're elected, what is your number one concern for Texas that you'll take action?
For Texas? Well, there are several concerns I have, but one that I think is potentially unique is the property tax situation. It's not unique in being concerned. I know that's, especially in the Dallas area, it's been really crazy the past 5-6 years. But my solution is unfortunately fairly unique in that obviously, I don't want to defund our schools. I certainly don't want to defund our police, which are all funded with property tax dollars. But what I do want to do is reform the tax code. So basically, the ideal solution would be completely eliminating the property tax and replacing it with a full consumption tax system. And that's actually very doable, and the consumption tax would not be as incredibly high as you think. If we switch, we could get rid of the state sales tax as well and replace it fully with a 7% value add tax. And I won't get into the nitty gritty of how that works. I can talk to you afterward and direct you to some resources where you can learn how that works. But bottom line, the transparency would be the same as the property tax. As the sales tax. It would actually be greater tax transparency than if you had a property tax, because renters, for example, renters pay a higher effective property tax rate than homeowners because you don't get the homestead exemption on your property. But most renters don't even think about it. They don't even realize they pay property taxes because they don't see it on their rent check. But in reality, they pay it. In fact, they pay it, like I said, a higher effective rate. It also hurts seniors who rent because they don't get any of the senior exemptions or caps that many do who own homes. But my big opposition to the property tax is because, well, one, you're never truly free if you don't even own your own home. You're basically, you buy the right to be the government's tenant when you buy under the property tax system. The other thing I don't like is ultimately your tax bill is, well, two things. One, it can very easily be divorced from your current financial state. So take this year, for example. We had part of the problem with COVID with the whole essential and non-essential business thing is that you had a great divergence in economic fortunes for people, right? So if you're a small business owner and you own a restaurant, for example, or you own a bar or a salon or something, you get shut down, you lose your gym, you lose your business. But home prices really didn't plummet at all. And so your property tax bill stayed the same, even if you had a net loss, a huge loss in your business and you went bankrupt. You still have to pay the full property tax bill. Whereas if you have a luxury-focused consumption tax or certainly an income tax, but we don't have that in Texas, I'm certainly not advocating for that. But if we had a consumption tax system and it was luxury-focused, as in like non-essentials, essentials would be exempt, kind of like with our current sales tax system, you would, okay, you had a rough year economically. You wouldn't go on vacations. You wouldn't buy a new car. You wouldn't buy a new computer. You'd make do with what you had, but at least you wouldn't get forced out of your home. But in our current system, that's what happens. And so that's one of the big reasons. It's also, it's a pro-liberty position, but it's also actually a progressive position. So it's something we can bring partisan unity on because, again, renters get disproportionately penalized. Generally speaking, it's not always the case, but generally speaking, lower income folks pay a higher percentage of their income in property taxes as well, relative to wealthier people. Even if a wealthier person owns a more expensive house, so their actual bill is higher, but the percentage of their income is generally lower than a lower income person due to economies of scale and other factors. So it's something we can build. And I've just found that talking about that issue to voters, whether they be on the left or the right, I've found tremendous interest and support for it. And so I think it's something we need to do to improve Texas and to improve our quality of life and our financial freedom.
Thank you. And this is for you guys, what do you say to those who say they can't get justice in the courts because of the cost of representation?
So that is definitely an issue that many brilliant minds have wrestled with in terms of trying to find access to courts. As you hear that word, access to courts, but I think that there's some fundamental things in our system that I'm not saying I'd be elected to change, but I think there's there's incremental steps that we can take. And also depend, it can be influenced, I guess, or supported by how a judge conducts themselves in the courtroom. So I think what I think referred to in that question is the idea that parties in a lawsuit, people that are actually in the courtroom. We're not talking about people outside settling and hiring lawyers for other purposes, but lawyers are expensive, and people that are in the courtroom have thus far, they've not settled, and it's kind of an all or nothing, right? They don't know if they're going to win, if they're going to lose, and they are hiring their champions, right? The people that are going to advocate for them. You have some people that can afford to do that, and they will represent themselves. Again, this is a civil context, not in a criminal context where you can have a government appointed free attorney for defense. But here, in the civil context, sometimes people can't afford it and they will represent themselves. And again, the idea is you're hiring a person to advocate for you. Justice should not be determined based on the resources that you have to hire the fanciest attorney, the smoothest attorney, the most connected, politically connected attorney, fill in the blank with that. It should not depend on that. And I think that a lot of people are jaded because they look at our court system and they see it as a place where either, it's just insurance companies fighting things out, or big companies fighting things out, or, the little guy going against the big company by hiring someone on a contingency basis because, slip and fall, personal injury, those types of things. They don't see the courts as a place where their actual disputes are going to be resolved. Most people want to just stay away and stay out of court. And so what happens in circumstances is a lot of times you'll see a common everyday injustice that where one party potentially is being that unreasonable party, maybe they are the more powerful party in this dispute, but you can't do anything about it because where are you going to take them? They have more resources. They're going to be able to hire that attorney that can represent them, and you might not be able to. So you're like, well, I just have to deal with it, right? So, and there's an aspect, there's a legislative aspect to that to try to help to make sure our laws are not biased one way or the other. But there's also just the judicial system that needs to be, I think, adjusted so that it's not ultimately who can you hire to represent you that's going to determine justice, but but is there a place for you to go to air your disputes? A lot of times, in representing, or not representing really, kind of initially talking through people at some of our local legal clinics I volunteer at, we would talk through these disputes with people. And partially it's just the idea of even just being able to share that with a lawyer was helpful for them because they were happy at least to let someone say, hey, that was unjust. I'm sorry that you had to deal with that. But so many times that's the dead end where that case would go because no lawyer is going to step up to take it because the money wasn't there. And I think we need to let those people that come in that have that unjust situation have a path towards resolving it.
I think that one thing, it's important to elect conservative judges, and that's not just a push for myself or other conservatives, but it's just as a fact. Because conservative judges, I believe, are going to first look at whether law is constitutional. They're going to look at the liberties of the people involved. If they're given, for instance, an order from a government to enforce, they're definitely going to look at the validity of that under the Constitution and the applicable legislation. So first, there's going to be some baseline evaluation by conservative judges, and then, as someone who cares about whether justice happens in the court, regardless of who has the best lawyer, I believe a conservative justice is going to go that extra effort to be prepared on the case, to put in the work, and to say, okay, fine, this is what great lawyering looks like over here, and I've heard their best argument. But what does that law actually say? This person is unable to necessarily muster up all of the various things that they have to say to enunciate a legal argument. But when I hear the facts, when I hear what they're saying, is there something there that I need to watch out for? And if they are looking through what the law says, they're going to strive to give strive to give justice regardless of whether people are fairly represented on both sides. So I think that's part of it. There's also an opportunity, I think, built on the model perhaps of how many DAs entice young lawyers to come work for them right out of law school, for there to be what's called a low bono program, which is where essentially it's not free, okay, but the court might be able to say, hey, I'd like to have a program of inviting lawyers, which are licensed in the state, to come and take cases for a low set fee, okay? You can choose, it's optional, this isn't government overreach, it's your choice as to whether you want to participate or not, but I can guarantee you there'll be cases because there are going to be people here and they're going to, they're going to pay. It's going to be a low rate, okay? And it's not meant to solve the problem entirely, because I think ultimately there's a lot more to it. But I think for a lot of young lawyers, I saw young lawyers come out of law school. They were licensed at some other law schools than SMU or UNT, and so they had trouble finding a job here. Or maybe they weren't necessarily in that top 15% that was going to go work for the biggest firms in town. And a lot of them got stuck finding a job at a local law firm because they were terrified they weren't going to be able to get work and get paid and those kinds of things. If they could immediately set to work at this low wage, which is be a fair wage for them, but would be a fraction of the price that a lot of these law firms would charge, I believe a lot of young lawyers would take that opportunity. I had a friend of mine, I think I was about to start, I had a friend of mine who took a job right out of law school. He went to the University of South Texas College School of Law, and he came to Dallas, couldn't find a job, and so he started working, practicing law for $8 an hour. Now, for a lot of people, that's the wage that they get, but for a lawyer, that's unheard of. And for him to bill his clients even $20, $30 an hour would have been a huge plus for him, right? And would have been a tremendous savings for people who are sometimes paying $1,200 an hour. So I think that you could expand access through that sort of program, through a low bono program. It would be built, there would be mentors involved through the local bar. You would have to, maybe retired lawyers could participate in that. I think that there's an opportunity there, and I would want to explore that, if I were on the bench.
And Sam, you mentioned earlier something about defunding the police. So what's your stance on that, like, completely?
I'm completely opposed to defunding the police. I think that obviously, I was in the military and I saw a lot of wasteful spending in the military, and I also had some friends even who told me of them saying some terrible things, abuses of power, people driving their tanks over random civilians in Iraq or shooting people with drones that they had no idea if they were terrorists. I mean, we live in a fallen world and our military is no exception. But just because we have some bad apples doesn't mean we don't defund the military. There is wasteful spending in the military for sure, and I'm sure there's wasteful spending in police departments, just like every area of government, there's waste. That's part of the nature of government. But at the same time, what are our priorities? I mean, the most fundamental role of the government is, like I said at the beginning, is to protect our right to life, liberty, and property. And that's the role of the police. That's the role of the military, obviously in different areas and different venues. But if we don't do that, then the government has no business existing at all, in my opinion. Everything else is just extra. And so, we have a crime problem in Dallas, especially it's rising. Crime is rising in Dallas, and especially in my district, we have crime, and it's a big issue. And so, until crime is eradicated, we need to have a police force, and they clearly need to be better equipped to battle crime if crime is rising. So we shouldn't defund them. Sure, we can say, hey, we want to spend the money more intelligently to better tackle crime. But that's different from defunding, and that's a local police department decision. But no, I'm totally opposed to defunding the police.
And whatever you two can say about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so I got a couple of things. I guess the first thing I was thinking of was the way, because what Sam was talking about was the idea that we can be more thoughtful in how we spend money. It's just funny how, when people are concerned about maybe education issues, right? That the idea is, well, we need to throw more money at education because it's not doing it. And I, with a conservative view, would look at that and say, well, let's also talk about how are things being administered? Are people being thoughtful on how the funds are spent? Is there corruption involved or money's going the wrong place? And I do think we, as conservatives, should take the same eye to any kind of government-run entity or institution, same as the police. Like we should have that view, just from this is again a big government, small government, just from the idea of bureaucracy, right? I do think we should take an eye and look at that just in every area. But the idea of that kind of comes behind the defund the police movement, I would address in the following way, because just a little bit of background on me. I went to law school here in Dallas at SMU, and then went to work with one of those big law firms that George referenced earlier, and worked there for several years. Throughout that time, I had volunteered with a local nonprofit called Advocates for Community Transformation, and starting off in law school, had volunteered with them and then was a volunteer lawyer with them. And then they asked me if I was interested in joining with them full time. And in that role, I would represent folks that were in high crime neighborhoods and suffering the oppression that comes from living in a high crime neighborhood. Talking about enjoying the property, you're not being able to enjoy your property, like you're not truly free. Well, if you're in a place that is oppressive with crime, you're also not truly free. If you feel like you can't let your kids play in the front yard, or if you can't feel safe going out to the mailbox at certain times of night, like that, it's something that it is a matter of injustice that I think that as a believer, I believe that I should care to address, and that I think as our community we should care to address. But in those areas where I was representing those residents in trying to address this through civil law causes of action, I would hear that my clients wanted more police presence. They wanted more police response time. They wanted more support. Now, they did not want police brutality. Clearly, they wanted people that were working with them in that. But there were some historic things. I mean, if you know about Dallas and the history of Dallas, I mean, there are people that I represented that probably had strong memories of police bad action. There's stories that you can hear of horrific things that have happened in West Dallas, where I worked primarily. And but they knew that the police that were there, that had their office in the local YMCA, he knew all those police by name, and they wanted those folks readily accessible to them at all times of night. They wanted people to be able to call and answer when the gunshots and the loud partying and the prostitution was happening next door to them. And so that's my concern with the idea of some of the ideas that are out there in these movements. And like, who are you truly seeking to help? Because I don't know that it's helping people that are there without the resources, without the voice to address the crime on their street, if you're going to take the police away from them too.
Simply put, we are a nation of laws, and without the police, our laws won't be enforced. I mean, it's as simple as that. Now, I'm against every form of government overreach, right? And a police force that is merely the weapon of government overreach is not on the side of the people. And so we must, on one hand, enforce our laws because our communities need it. Who are you going to call if you're in danger? A lot of people look at certain incidents that happen at some of the protests, or hey, someone's running a car through the people. I mean, awful things. The first response is we need to call the police, right? Because they know it's wrong and they know it needs to be enforced. That someone needs to have their bad acts addressed, right? And that we need justice for that situation. We need healing and restoration for those people who've been harmed. All of our laws, all of those actions require somebody at gunpoint to enforce it. If we don't have those people, none of that justice or restoration or any of that happens. None of our communities are protected. And for those people who are terrified, maybe partially because of true events and partially because of histrionic narratives that they've been sold. The best way I've seen working in some of those communities is for them to get involved with the police, to be part of community policing, to know the individuals who are there, to both have introduce their family and the people who are around them to their local police and to know them. There's at our church, there are these police, some volunteer their time, some are paid, and I've gotten to know them over time. And I miss them when our church stopped meeting for a while. We finally went back and we saw them again. It was like a relief. There's the officer that we've known that we love, Officer Smith. And at one point, one of those officers was missing. And he was missing because of what happened, 4 years ago on July 7th. And that officer was missing because he'd been shot in the streets of our city. And he was not the image of some sort of oppressor. I mean, he was not, first of all, he didn't fit the identity narrative of what is typically labeled as such, but he also was a man who didn't get paid. He came and volunteered every Sunday to come to church and just to keep the kids safe. And when he was gone, he and I used to spend time together because we volunteer at the church in the kids ministry and in the greeting team. And so I would see him and we'd talk. And I would be at my station being ready to engage with the kids and people there. And he was missing. There was a constant reminder of the fact that he had what he had done for his community, that he was just another person making a stand for his community. And I felt lost that he wasn't there. And I think that if our communities know the individuals who are there every day risking their lives, and if those individuals likewise know the people that are around them, know the struggles that they have, the things that they hold dear, the people, the names of the individuals who are on the streets around them, that we as a people can resolve some of the ills that we have with our broken policing system in some communities. And I would hope for a future where we were more drawn together rather than trying to just tear our city apart under some blanket statement of defund the police.
And Sam, what are your plans for small businesses?
Well, none, and that's part of the point. I believe in, I'm very much against any kind of central government planning of the economy, and that's socialism. I believe I'm a very strong champion of free market economics. I believe that we know best what we need and what we don't need, that it should be economic decisions, production, consumption, exchange should be made at the individual level, that entrepreneurs, they're the ones with skin in the game, so they're the ones who should be deciding what's produced and what's not. And consumers are the ones spending their hard-earned money, and so they should be the ones who help determine the prices and wages. And so I'm opposed to government intervention in the economy. So on that note, I guess I would argue that's very much a pro small business policy, that I think getting regulation out of the way, getting taxes out of the way, I think even getting rid of property taxes is going to be very pro small business, because they generally get hurt harder than bigger companies because the economies of scale factor. Property taxes are a bigger part of their expenses generally than for larger businesses. And so that's something that will help them as well.
And how would you guys protect?
Well, I think I can do this slightly with your lawyer verbosity, I guess, that you get normally, because I just think that ultimately it's just providing fair courts and opportunity and more access to justice. Just as Sam talking about property taxes, legal fees are a lot more odious type situation for a small business to deal with. When I worked in the big firm environment, I worked at a law firm called Bigger Butts, and they're an international law firm based in Houston, large Dallas office, the Dallas presence, and was representing, Fortune 50 companies that would come through, and people are spending very large amounts on their legal fees. Small business just can't do that. There's a question whether some large businesses should do that if they're really getting even the bang for their buck there. But still, the amount of money that it would take to get justice in the courts in the current state, I feel like is a little oppressive on small business. So the idea of providing that access to justice would assist small businesses.
The difference between myself and my opponent or many other judges on benches is I came into law as a second career. I worked predominantly in small business. I have a master's MBA, and I worked in several small businesses. I've owned my own small businesses. I've helped others with their small businesses, and I currently serve, after I clerked for the judge, and I've worked for a law firm. I now serve as counsel, and I work for a bank as well, a small community bank. And our small community bank deals with small business owners every single day, understanding their needs, their issues, the complications, where the vices are and the virtues. The things that really drive small businesses to stay up all night because of certain legal issues, certain things that they have to consider regarding their people, their ability to provide health care, how a single traumatic event could just wipe out a small business that may have been in business for 3 generations. And so I care, and I have a lot of experience as a small business owner, and so I don't necessarily think every judge has that. And so I think in my court, small business owners will have someone who at least understands what they're going through and the issues related to it. I understand the legal issues, but I also understand what it takes to run a small business and help people with that.
My last question, since we're getting short on time, I have a friend whose family is from another country, but they're here legally. She has friends on both sides, but she's noticed there's been quite a bit of division. So what would you propose to bring some unity and bring us back together in the last Sem first?
You're referring in terms of immigration?
No, that's who they are, their background. So they're here legally, but they work in America and they have friends that are conservatives, they have friends who are liberals,
Okay.
and they want to know how we can bring the country back together.
Gotcha. Yeah, so obviously, yeah, that's a huge issue. And I really think, and again, this is not a politically correct response, but I really do believe that the only way we can have unity as a country is returning to our roots of, obviously, our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence, but even the roots of the Declaration. And that's returning to the belief in a Creator and the fear of God in our society. That doesn't mean everyone has to become a Christian. It certainly doesn't mean everyone has to embrace the same denomination. But it does mean we have to return to that consensus. Because right now, what's really separating us is we can't agree on basic facts and what's true. That's what the debate is, whole fake news. We can't even have presidential debates anymore because both sides are operating on a totally different set of facts. Our news media is so fractured. You have one, I see a Breitbart pen over there. You have, right-wing news media reporting a certain narrative, and then you see CNN and other quote-unquote mainstream media sources reporting something entirely different. That's the social media censorship issue, even the defund the police issue. I mean, it's just an entirely different perspective on the world, and we cannot be the United States of America if we have one half of the country being driven by a worldview that's fundamentally rooted in the denial of there being a God that we're accountable to, and then the other half being driven by the fundamental idea that there is a God we're accountable to. And I think that goes back to Psalm chapter 2. It says, why are the nations in an uproar and the peoples devising a vain thing? The kings of the earth take their stand, they take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us cast their fetters apart and cast their cords from us, referring to God. And at the end it says, now kings of the earth, worship the Lord with trembling and fear him, and pay homage to the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way. And again, I'm not saying we all have to become theocrats and we all even have to become Christians. But there is that principle that, and that's really what it is. We have half the country is saying, our founding father Patrick Henry said, when people forget their God, tyrants forge their chains. And that's exactly what's happened. We've rejected this concept that we have a creator, and therefore our rights no longer come from the creator, they come from the government. Because we know we have rights because we're responsible to God. That's why he's given us rights, is because we have responsibilities. Therefore, no man should get in our way of fulfilling our duties to God, because he's the highest authority. But when we say there's no higher authority God that we're accountable to, there's no real reason to secure those rights other than that the top dogs in society, so for example, the government says so. And ultimately, if that becomes the case, then we're our responsibilities are to our government, not to anyone else. Therefore, we live for the sake of the state and not for the sake of God, and therefore we're no longer free. And that's really what's happening in our society. We have two warring worldviews. Most people don't realize that. They just get caught up in some issue that benefits them or some rhetoric or some personality that they like. I mean, sad to say, a lot of people support Trump because they like his personality, or they like it that he, sticks to the man, or they feel bad the media persecutes him or whatever, or maybe they like a certain issue. And the same on the left. Maybe it's because they hate Trump or because of some issue. But in reality, the real ideology driving this division is that it comes down to, do you believe that there's a greater God that we're accountable to and that gives us our inalienable rights, or do you believe it comes from the government? And so really it's going to take a spiritual revival, or at the very least a reawakening of our country to realizing, hey, we do have a creator God that we're accountable to. If we don't come to that, there's no way we're going to have any kind of lasting unity.
Thank you.
So I love just learning from Sam so much, because I really appreciate everything you said, and that there's definitely wisdom in that. And I think I would echo a lot of just the thing you said. It's not about creating a theocracy. We've seen throughout history, and we got to learn from history. That's the thing, right? No one wants to learn from history these days. You got to look at history and see where the corruptible hearts of man have taken everything, including Christian faith, including where church and state are melded within the king, and corrupted these things. And we have been so blessed by the idea that here we have freedom to believe what we want. And I think that rests on the foundation that Sam was talking about, that the idea is you have to have the protection of the moral foundation and code that says that we value you as a creation of God. Therefore, we will let you believe what you want. Because otherwise, if you have this counter religion that is what is, I think, being rising up, right? A religion of government, of politics. If that is what's being pushed out there, then there is it lacks that foundation. They don't see you as a creator. They see you as an impediment. You don't believe what I do, that you're an impediment. And so going to the point of unity, I think that the idea of unity around those founding principles, that even though there was a lot of brokenness in the founding of our country, that there's these ideals that are strong and upon which we can still form our that unity, that patriotic feel. Like we actually are so blessed to be here, and there are many countries around the world where they aspire to having that foundation. And so I think a lot of the disunity we have, in addition to the political side of it, is the racial disunity right now. And I think that's really concerning. I think it's really concerning in the Christian church as well, as other groups. We're very segregated in our churches and in our businesses and communities. And I think that there's a lot of historical reasons for that. And I think that another way we get back to that unity is finding ways to better connect with each other, understanding that we have these commonalities and forming relationships based on those things. Because I do think that we're allowing an external narrative to be pushed on us, when if we had more discussions, if maybe we got a little bit, nothing to say about it on social media, right? Again, but getting a little bit off yelling at people there, and instead going and meeting somebody in person, I think we would see a lot of change there as well. So I would just echo a lot of the things that Sam said, and add that component.
I think we have to fight for one another. Adding to the biblical element, the book of Jude says, "On some have compassion, on the others pull from the fire, hating even the garment of the flesh." And I think that we're in a situation where, as conservatives, what are we actually conserving? We're conserving the liberties, the American idea, the exceptionalism of what we all came together originally to build, a place where people could go from nothing into, the American dream, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness within one generation, in many cases. For a person who's an immigrant, that's one of the reasons, that's likely a reason that they came here. The protection of that person from all sorts of forces that would seek to pervert that, we have to fight for that. And the problem is that in our society, we have some who are speaking very loudly. We have some who are speaking anonymously, but we're missing the individuals who are the leaders of their community, who are the pillars, who are the people who are standing in the gap for everyone around them, standing up and speaking the truth, which they know and which is within them. It's like, hey, let's not burn our city down. Hey, let's help those who are in need. Hey, let's spend our time making this place better and working out our differences and trying to reconcile and to build something better for our future, because it's really not about, it's not about our side. It's about our country. It's about our family and our futures, and there won't be anything left if we tear each other apart. But the thing is that a war is being fought to delude us and to deprive a good part of our society from those rights and liberties in which they should be entitled, that they have not been allowed to step into what is rightfully theirs because of all these different other people over time who've had all of these different designs upon their lives, upon their votes, upon their futures. They have put them in bondage. The people who want to take people out of bondage cannot be silent. The people who want to bring the country together have to fight. It's a war of ideas. If one side's ideas are not being enunciated, are not being pressed out, and if they're the truth, then the truth is going to be crushed. And so bringing people together is sometimes about fighting. Because we have to fight for those across the aisle who have had a veil draped over their eyes and bring them into the light and say, brother and sister, let's stand on this together. That's what I think.
Thank you guys so much. Now, we have quite a bit of an audience behind us. You can't see them on camera, but we're going to have two of them come up and ask questions. And after that, we're going to thank you guys so much for watching and go from there. Who would like to go first?
I would like to.
You want to come closer?
If you want me to.
Yeah.
Talk loud enough to. This is for Jessica Lewis. I'd like to know what your opinion is on the ruling in the Shelley Luther case.
See, I don't know if Lee was here what I said earlier. I can't give my opinion on that case specifically. I can't say I would rule differently or
Okay.
the same way.
How about if I rephrase it more generally? Where's the line between freedom and safety when it comes to a pandemic?
What I can do is I can reword your question for you and give you what answer I can. What I can say is that for many people that care about the ruling in the Shelley Luther case, that the worldview and the foundation of the person that is on the bench matters, because it does translate into actual ruling. What that means is there are things that are written out saying that the legislature addresses and says, A plus B equals C. And there's other things where the court is given an element of discretion. And there are actually a lot of things where the court is given an element of discretion, because as you read a statute, every single case in front of you has different facts. You have to apply the facts. And so in places of discretion, you want to have a judge there that cares strongly about justice, impartiality, and our constitutional freedoms. And so those are the things that are going to provide the consistency in that court versus possibly biases, again, political agendas, deference to government, which is something that we don't want to see. We want to see every single case addressed individually, and also hopefully you think with a degree of common sense and mercy in it as well. at a time when we are in that circumstance, right? Letting people out because of jail because of COVID. You know, they think of those things as those rules being made. So that's why it matters who you elect to the bench.
And one more, please. No one else? All right, you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. And again, can you guys say who you are one more time, and then we'll end the live.
I'm Samuel Smith. I'm running for Texas House District 107.
Yes, and again, I'm Jessica Lewis. I'm running for the 14th Judicial District Court of Texas.
I'm Jordan Montgomery Lewis. I'm running for the 162nd Judicial District Court of Texas. My website is lewis4dallas.com. That's Lewis, the number 4, dallas.com.
That was
And my website is samuelsmith4texas.org. That's Samuel Smith, FORTEXAS.org.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
fun.